We think very highly of the human brain. After all, it's what lets us think about anything in the first place. But nature is vast, and our primate brains are not the end-all and be-all of neural engineering. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence these days as it rises in prominence and moves from sci-fi into household usage, but it's not the only type of AI out there. We have animal intelligence and maybe even alien intelligence. To truly understand our minds, or those we might create or encounter out in space, we need to look beyond our basic notion of human IQ to consider not simply where animals might fall on an IQ chart, but the strange ways in which they can excel at some type of thinking compared to other animals of similar intelligence or even exceed humans. Nor is IQ, intelligent quotient, the only metric available, and when we're talking about animals, we might be better off using EQ, and in this case we don't mean emotional intelligence, which is itself a good example of a specialized type of intelligence, but rather encephalization quotient. This type of EQ is an alternative to just measuring brain mass overall, or as a percentage of body mass. EQ is a measure used to compare the brain size of an animal to what it would be expected given its body size, providing insights into potential intelligence and complex behaviors of the species. Developed as an attempt to quantify the cognitive abilities of different animals relative to their size, the EQ is calculated by comparing the actual brain mass of an animal to the expected brain mass for an animal of that size based on a standard scale derived from many species. Humans have the highest EQ, indicating a brain size significantly larger than would be expected for their body size, which is associated with high intelligence and complex problem-solving abilities. The concept of EQ is particularly useful in evolutionary biology and comparative neuroscience, as it allows for the analysis of brain evolution and the development of cognitive abilities across different species. We'll see some interesting applications of this today, but even it doesn't seem to let us paint a full picture of what nature has to show us, let alone the minds we might create or encounter in the galaxy. I think this is an easier notion for folks to wrap our heads around these days as we see AI that excels at something that previously only rather smart humans could do. When I was a kid learning arithmetic, for instance, calculators were still relatively uncommon, and there was talk of how calculating was a waning skill because the machines would do it. We got this more when home PCs with spell check started becoming more common than typewriters when I was a young teen, and it was the realization that this hard mental task for us was actually very simple for a purpose-built device. Modern supercomputers are finally matching humans for raw processing power, but those early devices definitely did not. It's just that we were retraining our brain to do those tasks, and essentially using a sledgehammer to put a pushpin into the wall in terms of brain power used. Honestly, even that sledgehammer description falls short. Most of your brain is dedicated to motor control and very advanced data analysis, particularly of filtering out irrelevant information. This is why not remembering what you had for breakfast last month is not a bad thing, or in general, the way we tend to miss sleight of hand in magic acts. We have advanced filters for ignoring stuff that usually doesn't matter because our eyes process huge amounts of data constantly. Here our brains still outperform AI, and those bits of our mind used for conscious thought are small in comparison, but still so massive that it's like directing a tsunami at a region of the map in order to fill a cup of water, and about as precise, which is why that calculator, with less brain than even the simplest of animals, can do sums and figures faster than you and without error. And the same is true of early spell check, though that often did and does result in errors or missed corrections, as is not just a bigger math problem, but a vastly more complex kind of problem. For sheer raw brain power, humans are the top of the pyramid, and generally that goes on to the primates, then mammals and various birds, but you can get some interesting exceptions, especially at specialized tasks. Many animals excel in ways that challenge our understanding of intelligence and mental capabilities. These animals demonstrate exceptional skills in areas such as memory, problem-solving, communication, and emotional intelligence, often surpassing human abilities in specific tasks. One of the most remarkable examples of animal intelligence is found in the realm of memory. Clark's nutcracker, a bird native to western United States, showcases an extraordinary memory by hiding tens of thousands of seeds over dozens of square miles each fall, and remembering where it buried them months later. This feat of spatial memory and recall far exceeds the average human capability to remember locations and details. It would be nothing for a spreadsheet, of course, requiring a storage space well below a single megabyte in size, but brains are not set up well as a spreadsheet. What's more, while the board recalled them with amazing accuracy for months, they began making more errors in a study after half a year, and that really picked up in a check made at 285 days. Which makes sense in an evolutionary context. Why would that information be of any value after a period where those seeds they stored from last year are now appearing again in plain sight on plants for them to come eat fresh and hide some more of? Brains are expensive for animals to keep and maintain, and storage space on our loose parallel of a hard drive is too. That feat of memory would impress even on the human scale, while being trivial in computing terms, and at the same time, while impressive in that regard, Clark's nutcracker is not particularly noteworthy in other contexts. This is often the case for birds, and bird brain is a bit of a misnomer since it implies stupidity, but they are often shockingly intelligent in specialized ways, especially for the size of their brains, both in raw mass and proportional to their body weight. In the domain of problem solving, crows and other corvids have proven themselves to be incredibly adept. Research has shown that crows can use tools, understand water displacement, and even craft tools from materials they've never encountered before. These tasks require not only a grasp of causal relationships, but also the ability to plan several steps ahead, a level of cognitive function once thought to be exclusive to humans. Indeed, while we often point to other primates using basic tools as a sign of their intelligence, the New Caledonia crow has been known to craft spears, hooks, and scoops for getting at grubs and other hard-to-reach goodies. Some scientists believe that their hooks are the equivalent to fishing hooks, something we haven't found human examples of older than 20,000 years, a decently long time after Neanderthals had disappeared. If that is true, that means New Caledonia crows are not merely equivalent to Homo erectus or Neanderthals in tool usage, but rather they are equivalent to us, Homo sapiens sapiens. If that's our standard for evolution to reach technology, then we have at least two current and long unrelated branches of creatures reaching that point on Earth using very different brains. Dolphins too exhibit intelligence that in some aspects surpasses human abilities. They communicate using a complex system of squeaks and whistles, and there's evidence to suggest they may even have names for each other, known as signature whistles. Beyond communication, dolphins demonstrate self-awareness, as seen in mirror tests where they recognize themselves, indicating a level of consciousness and self-recognition that is rare in the animal kingdom. Emotional intelligence is another area where animals can outperform humans. Elephants are a prime example. In addition to having larger brains than us, pound for pound, elephants can display profound empathy, mourning, and even conducting rituals for their dead. This is not exclusive to us and them. We've seen mourning and grief in dogs and gorillas. Even rats in some experiments will attempt to rescue a fellow rat trapped in the experiment before going after food provided in the experiment. Such behaviors suggest a deep emotional complexity and understanding of death that parallels human emotions, challenging the notion that humans are uniquely capable of experiencing deep emotional connections and empathy. So we are not the only animals known to display deep upset at the loss of family and packmates, though humans and elephants both seem to exhibit profound and extended periods of mourning and loss. There is no obvious parallel for that with a computer or AI, but let us not overlook the importance that might have on a civilization developing. After all, a large portion of our most ancient and enduring pieces of workmanship are death-related. The pyramids are best known for that, but tombs and burial mounds dot every corner of this planet, and we found burial sites for humanity at least as far back as 100,000 years ago. One wonders at the evolutionary advantage of protracted mourning. Grief would surely be a crippling thing in any animal that produced a litter of young every year, and we've usually assumed it was an unfortunate byproduct of the evolutionary advantages of emotional attachment, which would tend to imply it evolves away over time. Indeed, some wonder if psychopathy might indicate an evolutionary attempt to evolve away from emotional attachments that might impair survival, something we'll discuss more next month in our Fermi Paradox episode on evolutionary and technological time bombs, but I would hesitate to assume grief and protracted mourning have no advantages and that's simply a bad side effect of another advantage or genetic scrap code waiting to get evolved away. Some have been suggested, like extreme and long-term grief at the loss of someone, often in nature being the product of a bad choice. Don't do X as it can get you killed, and ruminate on things like X to think of ways to avoid it. Shared feelings of loss can lead to increased cohesion and cooperation among surviving members, which is beneficial for the survival of social species. Strong social bonds can enhance group stability, resource sharing, and collective defense. However, even without those, I think in a high-tech and abstract thinking way, you can definitely point to how mourning and loss push human thought forward. I disagree with portrayals of ancient Egypt as being death-obsessed, but it clearly was a big theme for them, and they certainly helped push a lot of engineering and technology forward. It encourages you to try to solve problems you're not currently facing, if you're remembering ones that hurt others in the past. Intelligence is not necessarily something you need to wait for on million-year evolutionary timescales either. Raccoons are notorious for their intelligence, and many have adapted well to the human and urban landscape. Indeed, those living in urban areas seem to be selecting for greater cleverness. These city-dwelling raccoons exhibit significantly higher intelligence levels compared to their counterparts in the wild, which can probably be largely attributed to the unintended consequences of human behavior. By securing their food in places inaccessible to less cunning creatures and resorting to pest control to remove raccoon nests, humans have inadvertently applied a form of selection pressure that favors smarter raccoons, and possibly friendlier or cuter ones. For the first half of this channel's history, I lived at my cottage in Geneva-on-the-Lake, a little resort town here in northeast Ohio, and used to go out on my porch to smoke, before quitting 4 years ago. That porch was near where I kept a bird feeder that local raccoons raided regularly along with hunting frogs from my pond. One of them, who I later nicknamed Trash Bandit, had gotten much bolder, probably by noticing my cat freely sat down next to me, and eventually got to the point where I would feed him Cheerios, while he stood next to the steps. Survival in urban environments demands a higher level of intelligence, leading to an intriguing speculation. The presence of an intelligent species might catalyze the evolutionary advancement of other species on their planet. It would certainly fit with the idea that predator-prey cycles frequently pushed improvement in intelligence and reflexes. Evolution can also happen in quick bursts. Some mutation pops up and is so advantageous it spreads quickly and also forces reactions via selection pressures on everything else in that environment, even if it isn't in an obvious predator-prey relationship with that organism. I should note that this dynamic isn't necessarily universally beneficial. For instance, the red-tailed hawk is generally considered one of the most intelligent birds out there. They are also reportedly becoming heavier and less active, and are content with scavenging on garbage and roadkill rather than pursuing traditional hunting. Ironically, this adaptation might seem like a smarter, energy-efficient strategy. Such observations raise questions about intelligence and adaptability across the cosmos, and of course we often encourage folks to work smarter, not harder. Pigs, who have an unfair reputation for laziness and sloth from rolling around in mud and filth, are also legendary for their problem-solving abilities, and able to get out of virtually any pen we could design. They also have 33% smaller brain size than wild boars, and most domesticated animals show smaller brains than their wild ancestors, and yet they're still pretty impressive, and probably adapted a bit to humans. Even chickens can be surprisingly intelligent, and even as I'm writing this, my kids have been racing around the yard for the last hour trying to catch one of 2 roosters, who is an escapee or exile from our coop far beyond the house, and who's been cawing outside my window every morning for some days, so we're trying to fit him for a collar designed to make him crow a bit quieter. A month later, as I'm recording this, we have not yet succeeded. And they've given him a name now, so I'd feel bad about explaining what the usual retirement policy for spare roosters is, or enacting it. But the rooster clearly views it as a game, since whenever they give up, it will emerge from cover and chase up behind one of them, and this has been going on for quite a while now. But chickens are another example of surprising if specialized intelligence in nature. In addition to the complex, if vicious pecking order system of hierarchy they do have specific and distinct clucks and noises that they make to inform others of threats from above, like an eagle, versus ground threats or the discovery of food. There's a good article on it in Scientific American's May 2017 issue that explores it. The chicken's calls are functionally referential, as behaviorists would say, meaning that they refer to specific objects and events broadly in the way that words used by people do. In a chicken hearing the calls, the sounds appear to create a mental picture of that particular object, prompting the bird to respond accordingly, whether to flee a predator or approach a food source." End quote. Functionally referential signals and communication are also big in mammals and of course are critical to the very concept of language, where for humans it can get way more sophisticated, but shouting fire to warn people of fire and setting off a group reaction would be one example. Language is something we can now put AI to use for, and is another example, like problem solving, where we often get surprised by what nature has produced. Complex problem solving is also not a trait limited to mammals and birds. Octopuses provide fascinating insights into animal intelligence, particularly in their problem-solving abilities and use of camouflage. These solitary creatures can solve puzzles, escape from enclosures, and often use tools, demonstrating an ability to learn and adapt. Their ability to change color and texture to blend into their surroundings in an instant not only speaks to their survival skills, but also an extraordinary sensory and neural adaptability, and also another example of advanced intelligence emerging separately by evolution, and indeed way further off than any mammals or even bird brains. All of our furry or winged cousins track back to a land creature just over 300 million years ago and share some basic brain architecture with each other from that common origin. The octopus, on the other hand, has a donut-shaped brain that wraps around its throat rather than being mounted above the mouth and throat as we think of as normal. And if we're trying to contemplate alternative intelligence for insights into the alien mind, few things are more alien than the octopus. They have blue blood due to them having copper in it, like Spock from Star Trek, on account of having hemocyanin in their blood rather than our iron-containing protein hemoglobin, but that's not too strange. Some other critters do, like horseshoe crabs, scorpions, spiders, and many others who are adapted for deep-sea or low-oxygen conditions. Some critters have clear blood or green blood too, which is the color Spock's blood gets described as. The octopus also has no bones, color-changing skin, and is adapted to a different atmosphere, so pretty alien, but it's their brains that are really weird. Not just the donut-shaped part, their tentacles also have subbrains, resulting in very different architecture. Yes, octopuses show some surprisingly human-like intelligent behavior, which is all the more impressive since they have nowhere near as many neurons as we do. We have nearly 100 billion neurons, whereas the octopus has about 500 million. Neurons are not a great corollary for intelligence, even just counting cortical neurons. Humans have less total neurons than whales and elephants, for instance, and some critters are a lot smarter or dumber than their relative neuron count would imply. But there's a loose correlation at least. And as an example, a crab or lobster has more like 100,000 neurons, a millionth what humans have, and several thousand times less than an octopus. Of that octopus's 500 million neurons, around 180 million are concentrated in the central brain, with around 50 million in each of its 8 tentacles, and this distributed brain may account for some of its weird or mental feats. While octopuses or octopi in general show some stunning intellect, the larger Pacific striped octopus, or LPSO, is probably the one best known for its intelligence and gregarious nature. They are not solitary like most octopi, and atypically non-lethal in their breeding habits. Other octopi are cannibals, where mating is lethal, and typically the last meal of the female too, who starves herself to death guarding her clutch of eggs, which is thought to be an evolutionary failsafe to keep her from eating them. Thus both male and female only ever reproduce once, if that. The LPSO does neither and again isn't solitary. and theoretically this could lead to passing on knowledge to future generations, along with permanent traits which might be vulnerable during protracted periods of maturation. Our big brains and bodies can't work without parents protecting and feeding us. So this is an example of a possible pathway toward a civilization insofar as we see a fair amount of brain, some impressive problem-solving ability, and an evolution away from cannibalism and lethal reproduction towards social behavior. Not including whales and dolphins as mammals, the octopus might be the most plausible path to an intelligent civilization in a post-human period, especially one where surface life got wiped out, which is always easier than total extinction. For instance, a close proximity supernova could massively damage an atmosphere and its radiation shielding properties, which would not spare the ocean entirely, but which would be far worse on the surface, and the same for volcanic ash or impact debris, which can block sunlight in general for a while, but can also blanket the ground in a suffocating fashion. Yet as merely nutrient in the sea, so too a high proximity supernova, which many worlds have probably experienced and maybe repeatedly, might tear off a lot of an atmosphere instead of just blasting its ozone layer. But much of this would regenerate from evaporation of the ocean afterwards, and things living deep undersea could survive scenarios that even obliterated all cockroaches, or even burrowing hive creatures like ants, which we'll return to in a bit. I should note that the kindred of the octopus, the squid, has its own impressive nervous system. The reaction rates of squids is very impressive, and the giant squid axon, in spite of not being myelinated, which slows conductive rates, is still an impressive 25 meters per second. One way of looking at intelligence is to view it as how much processing you can do, which is both how many circuits or neurons you got firing and how fast the signal travels. What you do with that processing matters too, of course, but in the raw speed sense, a creature which evolves very fast reflexes can rapidly dominate its environment and has the basic building block in place to evolve a brain that is very high speed and thus overpowered for its size. An oceanic creature can circumvent a lot of the heat and cooling issues a large brain can present, so it might be easier for evolving them. It's also a decent example of the potential differences between raw brain power or speed versus intelligence. Squids have amazing reflexes, but they do not show the level of intelligent behavior that octopuses do. Cuttlefish have very complex social interactions, even possibly to the point of approaching language, but they do not exhibit the tool use and escape skills that octopuses do. In this regard, it isn't that hard to imagine some alien squid or octopus evolving a smart civilization under the seas, especially on planets with less land surface area or which had received frequent or recent astronomical catastrophes. Whether or not they could develop technology is something we discussed before in our episode on technology without fire, and will more in the upcoming episode Oceanic Moons. Needless to say, there's a lot of areas where animals outperform humans, and the line between the mental or cognitive and other advantages can be blurry. For instance, a bear is obviously stronger than us, but a smaller bear with faster reflexes might be more physically dangerous in a fight. Extrasensory capabilities shouldn't be ignored too, especially in how they can solve problems. If you can see in other spectrums or have a sensitivity to magnetic fields strong enough to see by them, like sharks seem to, that might give you some insights. But if your eyeballs have developed to process images at higher frame rates than ours, which is in the tens of frames per second, or has evolved to let you focus on multiple things at once, then you might be a lot better at certain types of multitasking, or develop a language based on very rapid visual signals that was much higher bandwidth than our audio equivalent. Even something minimal like a better hearing system that gives you twice as much brain devoted to managing it might result in the ability to have very complex languages that everyone could learn very fast. In a civilization with 10 million words that everybody knows, and few are true synonyms of each other but more distinct, you have some options for conveying complex and abstract ideas quickly and clearly. Indeed, it's been suggested that modern humans had more developed chins for more and better linguistic options compared to Neanderthals and might have allowed superior communication. A species developing a language to help hunt and gather has a real big and quick advantage to encourage them doing this if instead of shouting over a few seconds a one-sentence general plan, you can accurately convey what would take us whole pages of explanation and clarification because you got 10,000 distinct words for position, location, and attitude, including separate ones for each individual limb, pair of limbs, or objects you're holding in one. You don't just scream, "Watch out!" You, in a brief moment, can convey that the threat is a large eagle descending from a specific trajectory and speed towards a given spot or person. And as everyone knows, this type of eagle is prone to throwing curveballs by switching targets to the left at the last moment. So too, how those senses and the brains adapted to manage and process their input might give them some insane advantages in things like grasping math, statistics, geometry, or science, to the point that some solitary critters might actually be able to develop advanced engineering from basic tool use in a single generation, especially if they were long-lived. And we have no real reason to assume an alien biology would age on anything like our timetables. Normally with alien intelligences, we tend to assume they have a lot of shared evolutionary traits with us. This is why we often say that artificial intelligence made by us might be more alien in its thinking than actual aliens, since they maybe have evolved long ago in a galaxy far away, but still under Darwinian pressure, which an AI would not have, initially anyway. And we tend to assume that means an ability to have a spacefaring civilization that has at least some concepts for escalation and diplomacy, concepts for rightful possession and theft or murder, parents, children, siblings, friends, neighbors, and having been at various points in their life in an advantaged or disadvantaged position relative to some of them, to give concepts like mutual aid, defense, mercy, fairness, and so on, even if they might be weird or vicious in our eyes. A lone intelligence evolved from a species of sibling cannibalism and mate killing isn't as likely to have those, it would seem, and thus be a very alien intelligence compared to other aliens too. Nor is a solitary intelligence the only way that can get alien. A hive mind can be too. As we mentioned a moment ago, one of those advantages might be fast explanations between social members. And speaking of fast explanations, the notion of hive intelligences that can pass thoughts and even complex imagery back and forth telepathically is a popular one in science fiction, but you could have naturally evolved radio antennae, and brains evolved to send rapidly compressed copies of whatever their eyeballs saw to each other. Potentially even something weird like an evolved encryption pattern that only relatives could see because it used a segment of your DNA as the encryption key. But whereas the idea of a solitary creature evolving technology without evolving cooperation and social skills can be a scary one, the hive mind can be just as scary, either because that hive mind may truly be a solitary creature that just happens to have many subminds composing it, no more individual than our organs or cells are, or because its members might still have individual minds of impressive scope, and yet be really fond of adding new members with a zeal the most fanatic missionary might quail at, and to which resistance is futile. See your science fiction show of choice for more options for that, or our episodes on hive minds or technological telepathy for a more deliberate and scientific take. In those, we noted you might have subminds that could merge together into temporary minds, where you don't just have a dozen subsystems that can merge into a greater mind for bigger problems, but instead where 5 out of 12 of them might merge to form a distinct mind to deal with a problem specific to them. And where that has a unique personality but is also not exactly an individual, its personhood is hazy and is often in a dream state of hibernation. It is just one of millions of perturbations and combinations of some of those 12 minds joining up that form semi-unique and temporary hive minds. One parallel for conceptual purposes is the way human cliques tend to work, with most of us in multiple and entering or leaving regularly, or with varying degrees of involvement that aren't static either. It wouldn't be too hard to imagine that escalating with biological or technological telepathy added to the mix either. You could have brains of naturally evolved creatures that were like that too. Indeed, even ignoring multiple personality disorder, which is still debated in psychology and at best poorly understood neurologically, we all have what we might call sub-personalities that we tend to wear for different situations, and those could obviously get to be a lot more distinct to the point of even being separate individuals sharing a body, like a 2-headed monster or 10-headed hydra, but could also be some in-between point that was practically to the point of running multiple apps on the same computer, and mostly unrelated to socializing, just a brain evolved to be more compartmentalized with conscious thought and by having multiple ones that might share a lot of the same neurons, or as an extension of multiple brains, as the octopus is not the only organism with chunks of brain scattered around its body, and we even see that in some insects like grasshoppers and bumblebees, and less pleasantly, mosquitoes and cockroaches. Ducks sleep with half their brain at a time, and the two halves of the human brain have distinct jurisdiction, left brain, right brain. We also do have two-headed snakes, and while most of these are short-lived, some have lived many years. They have even reproduced, though their offspring are normal and one-headed. Polycephaly occurs as a birth defect in many organisms, including mammals, though almost always very short-lived and with one non-functional, so it isn't just snakes, they just tend to have a modest chance for survival in this state, and we also see it fairly often in turtles. And again, at least on Earth, those that survive to breed are not passing this on as a genetic trait. But we could imagine it as a hereditary mutation, as could variation of networked subminds, and we might see that in some alien, but I think we almost certainly see it in artificial intelligence and in this century too, as it implies some serious thinking advantages for some specialized tasks. While all these examples highlight areas where animals outshine humans in specific mental tasks, they also prompt a broader reflection on the nature of intelligence itself. Even in a case of human brains and chimps, where we're taught to think ours is basically a chimp brain upgraded, this isn't really right as theirs function differently. Chimp brains do chimp things, human brains do human things. Chimps have been shown to outperform humans in some areas like working memory. We aren't descended from them, they are all cousins and have been mentally evolving too. As we learn more about our minds and animal minds, we keep finding that as smart as we are, we do not have a monopoly on intelligence, and don't understand intelligence as well as we thought. This understanding pushes the boundaries of what constitutes intelligence, suggesting it encompasses a wide range of skills and adaptations that are finely tuned to an animal's environment and survival needs. The traditional human-centric view of intelligence is being challenged by the recognition of these diverse forms of cognitive abilities across species, and as we learn to make AI and ones that outperform us massively at some tasks that we once thought the realm of only the human or even the genius, while still being dumber than any mammal. We still understand so little about our minds, and much of that has come through studying other minds, first animals and now artificial ones. By studying and appreciating the ways in which animals excel, we not only broaden our understanding of intelligence, but also gain a deeper respect for the rich cognitive landscape shared by all living creatures, and which may only grow as we forge artificial minds. This perspective encourages a more inclusive view of intelligence, one that values the remarkable abilities of animals and recognizes the intricate web of cognitive skills that define life on Earth, and perhaps even beyond. We were talking about intelligence today, and one of the smartest decisions I ever made years back was to switch away from cheap disposable razors to a safety razor. They're a great example of how small costs can quickly build up, and the last stat I saw was that the average cost of razors per year, disposable or electric, was over $100 each. Whereas it's been a few years since I last bought a box of razor blades for my safety razor, and that cost about $5 at the time. I'm very glad to see the rising trend of folks switching back to safety razors, like Henson's, as they do give a better shave and aren't emptying your wallet while filling landfills with plastic and razor blades. When Henson Shaving sent me one of their razors to try out though, it brought the total safety razors I've owned in my life up to 3. My original I lost while deployed in Iraq almost 20 years ago, and then there's the one I was using till last week. And now there's my Henson razor, and I figured it would be a good product because Henson has a great reputation, but I was genuinely surprised how much better a shave it gave. Henson's uses precision manufacturing to aerospace standards. They helped manufacture pieces for a Mars rover and the space station, so they get the importance of quality. This makes a razor where the blade fits in tight, and that stops the vibration and flexing of the blade that cause a lot of the irritation and razor burn people often get from shaving. That tight tolerance on the blade position, exposing only 27 microns of razor, also makes it easier to adjust to shaving with one if you're new to safety razors. Stop wasting money on disposables and elaborate 5-blade cartridges. One 10-cent blade is all you need if it's held in place by precision engineering like Henson's Shaving offers. Try it now though at hensonshaving.com/IsaacArthur, and Henson Shaving will throw in a free 100-pack of razor blades if you use promo code IsaacArthur at checkout, and you'll see why they have a stunningly low 2% return rate. Stop wasting money on disposables and start getting a better shave at a fraction of the cost. Go to hensonshaving.com/IsaacArthur. Last year we had a pair of episodes on superpopulated hive worlds and the idea of hungry aliens, and I ended up doing a companion video on space freighters on Nebula to discuss interplanetary shipping. This week we have an extended and remastered version of that episode coming out, looking at space freighters, what they'll carry, and who will crew them, on Sunday, May 26. Then we'll wrap the month up with a trip to Ganymede, the largest of the moons of Jupiter and indeed the largest moon in our solar system, and we'll ask if perhaps humanity might settle this moon. After that we'll head into June to look at what sort of jobs in space and the space industry there are, both now and in the future. Then we'll return to the Fermi Paradox and continue today's discussion on the nature of intelligence to ask if our minds themselves may be a ticking time bomb waiting to inevitably ruin us. If you'd like to get alerts when those and other episodes come out, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. You can also help support the show by becoming a member here on YouTube or Patreon, or check out other ways to help at isaacarthur.net. You can also catch all of SFA's episodes early and ad-free on our streaming service Nebula, along with hours of bonus content like machine monitors at go.nebula.tv/isaacarthur. As always, thanks for watching and have a great week.